right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm happy to be joined by John Draths from Nuveen. He's an education savings specialist, and he's going to help us talk through some thoughts and considerations today around 529 plans. And these are really important kind of considerations and general topics. But if you have deeper questions or you need help with strategy or planning, certainly reach out to our team because we're happy to talk through the specifics and how it will impact you. But I thought what would be good, John, today is just to kind of talk through some of the myths and the facts around 529s. You guys have a nice presentation on that. So we'll kind of go through and outline some of the most common questions we get and some of the most common things that are misunderstood when it comes to 529 plans and what they are, and maybe more importantly, what they aren't. So thanks for being with me and welcome, John.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I always really love these calls and videos that we get to do, and hopefully provide a little bit of insight for everyone who's listening or watching in.
So I think what we should start with is a lot of times 529 plans are misunderstood. Sometimes they're called college savings plans or educational expense plans. So let's just start with the most basic thing. What is a 529 plan, and is it only for college, or is it a little bit more broad? What else can these plans be used for?
Yeah, a really great question to open things up. So at their highest level, 529s are education savings plans. We like to describe them as a gift from Congress, as they offer tremendous benefits dedicated for the purpose of higher education savings. Now, there are additional pieces of flexibility that you have within a 529 plan. You're not solely restricted to using them for college expenses, though that is the intention. There are additional pieces of flexibility with K through 12. You can use a certain amount for K through 12 tuition, also student loan repayments. So there are additional pieces of flexibility, but at the highest level, depending upon the state, these can be triple tax exempt vehicles. You'll get tax deductions on the front end. These are qualified accounts, so all growth is tax deferred. You won't have to worry about annual tax statements. And then as long as they come out for qualified expenses, 100% tax free as well. So it does vary on that first bit a little bit. I mean, if you're in states like Florida, Texas, Washington, a number of other states don't offer the deductions. But again, very impactful strategies for higher education savings.
Awesome. And when it comes to K through 12, a lot of people don't know you can use the plan for that. But when it comes to, K through 12, when it comes to community college, any type of higher education, are the dollars in the plan, and this isn't a trick question because the answer is no, but are the dollars in the plan only allowed to pay for tuition? That's a common misunderstanding or a common question we get. Other educational related expenses are not eligible. It's only for tuition. So what are some other things people should kind of build into those projections that they can use that 529 money for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important topic. And you're right. The answer is no, with a little bit of an asterisk on it. So you had mentioned K through 12 expenses. So for K through 12, if you're going to a private high school, something like that, that is going to be restricted to tuition only. So they will cap you at $10,000 per year for K through 12 expenses for a beneficiary. And again, that is tuition only. Now, for higher education, for colleges, that is going to be greatly expanded. So it's not just tuition, it's books, school supplies. If you're a marketing major and need to go get a laptop, you can go get a laptop with your 529. Room and board expenses, meal plans, all of this falls under the umbrella of qualified expenses. The main item that we get questions on that is definitely not a qualified expense is travel. So you can't book a flight coming back home from Thanksgiving, unfortunately. I've even had someone ask, my son is going to commute to school. Can I buy him a Camaro? Unfortunately, while that would be really nice, you cannot go buy a Camaro with a 529 plan. Outside of that, again, there's a lot of flexibility. If you wanted to live off campus, you can absolutely use a 529 plan to live off campus to pay for things like rent, to pay for utilities, groceries. Just the extent of what you would be able to pay would be what it would cost to live on campus. So if it's $1,700 a month for room and board, That's what then you can use to pay for things like off-campus housing, rent, utilities, all of that good stuff. So yeah, there's a wide variety of what's considered a qualified expense. And then on top of that, there's also about 600 international schools on the approved list for what is a qualified institution. So it's not just US schools as well. If there's study abroad programs that they wanted to take advantage of, that's 529 eligible for the most part.
Okay. Awesome. Another big question we get is, so let's say I'm the one opening a 529 account and I'm going to be the one funding it. That means I'm the account owner. It's my account, but I'm going to name a beneficiary. So in a lot of cases, it's probably going to be your children, right? That's probably the most common, maybe your grandchildren. So as the account owner who opens the account and owns the account and is funding that account, how does the control work? I mean, a lot of people have a reservation that if they put money in the account, they sort of lose control over it, or now they're giving that money, to the beneficiary, to that child, to that grandchild. So talk about control of the account and how that works when I set it up and open it and fund it. At what point do I lose control of my money, if ever, and how much control does the beneficiary have over the funds that are in that account?
Yeah. Yeah. So short answer is you never lose control as the account owner. The account owners retain control over the account for the life of the plan. The beneficiary really never has any say in, how the assets are ultimately distributed, unless it's the case where you are both the account owner and the beneficiary. So like I have an account for myself actually where I'm the account owner and beneficiary. So in those instances, the beneficiary has control. But by and large, 529s, the account owner retains control over the life of the plan. So that will never change. It's not like a unified trust account like UGMAs or UTMAs. Those have that automatic provision where it's 18 to 21, where account ownership will automatically transition over to the beneficiary. Like I know myself at 18, I would not trust myself with a big sack of money at that age. I probably would have done something stupid
Me
like
either.
buy a Camaro or something like that. Yeah, exactly. So having that sense of control as the account owner is very nice. Again, the assets are always intended for the use of the beneficiary, but you also have the ability to update account owners, update beneficiaries at any time, but you as the account owner have the discretion to do that at any time.
Yeah, that's another one we get a lot. So let's talk about that for just a minute before we move on and talk about limits and stuff like that. So as the account
Yeah.
owner, if I save, a pile of money for my child to go to college, and let's say, he or she is a superstar and they get a full ride scholarship, and now I don't need to use that money to pay for that tuition. I can change that beneficiary. I can name someone else as the beneficiary, and those dollars can go toward that person's education. And also, if I decide for any reason at some point, I can change the ownership. So I can transfer ownership of the account to someone else. So can you tell us really quickly how changing a beneficiary or changing an account owner works, and what the restrictions or the limitations are around that?
Yeah, yeah, I can absolutely get into that. And you had mentioned something that I actually want to take a second to focus on. It's very impactful and not everyone is really familiar. And that has to do with scholarships. So an added piece of flexibility within 529s, if a beneficiary does receive a scholarship, you are eligible to take out that amount of money for any reason at all, penalty free. Now, you will still have to pay taxes on the growth portion, but there are no additional 10% penalties like there would be with a standard non-qualified withdrawal. A hypothetical example, if you're getting $25,000 a year academic scholarship, again, you can pull out $25,000 per year they're receiving that scholarship penalty free. So that's an additional piece of flexibility. Again, not everyone knows about it. That also counts for like military academies as well. So if they're going to Air Force Academy, West Point, something like that, Naval Academy, you're eligible to have some additional flexibility, which is very nice. Now, to your point, Ryan, you can also update beneficiaries at any time. There is a restriction on who you can update the beneficiary to. The best way I like to kind of think about it is think about first cousins as like the basic parameters, and then you can go anywhere up and down the generational line. So if I'm the beneficiary, we can update it to my cousin, their spouse, obviously my brothers and sisters, can go back to my parents. If I were to have kids, we can go down to my kids, my nieces and nephews. We can also update the beneficiary to my grandparents, like if they wanted to go take classes at the local community college or something like that. So you can update the beneficiary at any time, and there's no limits to the number of times you can do that. You're just restricted to cadence, so it'd be one per calendar year. But that's a really nice feature which allows them to use these as sort of legacy planning accounts if you can. So I had mentioned earlier that I have an account open for myself. Not to make this all about me. I just got married a few months ago. We plan on having kids, not
Congratulations.
quite this year. Thank you very much. So I opened an account for myself this year. We don't plan on having kids yet this year. Hopefully that's a task for next year. But I get the tax break this year. As soon as my kid is born, has a social, we can transfer that money on down. So yes, you have a lot of ability to update beneficiaries, and you can also update account ownership if you no longer want to be responsible, if you wanted to transfer it to your child for your grandchild, something like that. Those are all non-taxable events, no fees or anything like that associated with that.
Now, probably a couple of the last two most common questions that are sort of these just kind of general high level questions. What are the 529 plan limits? So I know you said some states offer, tax advantages, some don't. But as far as how much I can put into a 529 plan per year, what's the limit of the amount of money I can put in? And what's the limit on my income? If I make too much money, am I unable to contribute to a 529 plan?
Yeah, all really great questions. So I'll address the last one first. There are no income restrictions, so you will not get phased out of being eligible to contribute to a 529 plan. You're always free to do so. Now, when it comes to contribution limits, there's a few different limits that I like to kind of talk about depending upon what exactly is being referenced. So first is going to be the deduction limit. That's going to vary from state to state on what they will offer. So like California is an example where they will not offer a state income tax deduction. Colorado, however, is a state that for joint filers, you can deduct up to $38,100 per year per beneficiary. So it will be somewhere in that range, depending upon the state you ultimately live in. The next limit that I like to talk about is the gift tax exemption limit. So there's a certain amount of money you are allowed to essentially gift to relatives without paying any sort of taxes or fees. If you go above that, there are certain like gift tax implications. And that threshold for 529s is $38,000 even for joint filers, $18,000 for individual filers. So anything you contribute above that dollar amount will go towards what is considered your lifetime gift tax exemption limit, which is currently around $14 million. So I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers around, but 38,000 for joint filers would be the standard amount. For those looking to play a little bit of catch up, maybe they're behind on contributions, or you're a grandparent looking to reduce the size of your taxable estate, do legacy planning for your grandchildren, we can offer a accelerated gifting program of 5 years. So you can do 5 years of contributions in one go. So that would be $38,000 times five, meaning $190,000 can be contributed to a beneficiary's account in one go without any gift tax implications. Now, as you can probably imagine, once you do that accelerated 5 year gifting program, you would then just be restricted from further contributions for the next 5 years. However, those are the options. You can, in theory, this may be opening a can of worms a little bit, you can put in the lifetime contribution limit of 500,000. It's just anything above that 190 will be counted towards your lifetime gift tax exemption limit. So it's eligible to put in $500,000 in a single contribution. There just will be some gift tax and additional planning that would be required as a part of that conversation.
So anyone that's looking to make up for lost time, maybe you got started late, or like John mentioned, if you've got grandparents or other family members or other friends who are well off, who are looking to take advantage of some estate planning features that will be beneficial to them, look for that 5 year accelerated contribution. That can be really, really powerful. So let's jump into a little bit around some of the timelines and provisions and protection features around these 529 plans. So we said that we can change beneficiaries if there's a change in plans. That's good. That's very flexible. But What's the deadline? If I contribute and let's say I have some money left over after my children are finished with their schooling, what's the deadline on how long that money can stay in the account? Does it have to come out? Can it stay there forever? What's the timeline on how long those funds can stay in that plan?
Yeah, yeah. So short answer there are no time horizons with 529s. Assets can sit in the plan indefinitely. So we do have contribution limits of 500,000, but then once we've hit that marker, it can grow indefinitely. So as long as you let it sit for long enough invested, you can have a $5 million 529 plan in theory. So there is no time horizon, no required minimum distributions or anything like that associated with these plans. Assets, again, can remain invested in them indefinitely. In instances where, you have unused money, I like to describe sort of four main options within a 529 plan. The first is just as we were talking about, you can let the money sit for later in life. Maybe, you've graduated from college, but you're thinking about maybe going to get an MBA. You're maybe thinking about going to law school, changing careers later in life. You can let that money sit for use for when you go back to school, go to grad school, whatever the case may be. Option two is you can update beneficiaries. Like we talked about earlier, you're free to do that at any time. And kind of marrying those first 2 points together, as long as you have the funds up front, you can set these up as legacy planning accounts to be passed down for generations to come. Third option is relatively new as of last year, maybe 2 years ago, with Secure Act 2.0, where you are now eligible to convert up to $35,000 lifetime from a 529 plan into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary of that 529 plan. So there are a couple rules surrounding that. I'll give you some of the basics. First one is the account has to be open for 15 years before you're eligible to start that conversion. The money that you're converting has to have been invested in that 529 plan for at least 5 years. Before you're eligible to start converting. But once you hit those two time hurdles, you're good to go to start that process. Now, you are still limited towards annual contribution limits for IRAs, which is currently 7,000 at this point. So the quickest you'd be able to do the full $35,000 benefit is over the course of 5 years. But the really nice part about this, unlike normal Roth contributions, there are no phase outs for income. So it would be another good problem to have. If you're making $200,000 a year right out of school, they're not going to phase you out. You're still eligible to convert that full $7,000 each year. So that's what makes these such great features. Even if you overfunded, then you are able to gift your child not only the gift of education, but also allow them a jump start on their retirement savings as well. Just massive benefit for young grads. And then the fourth option I'll describe is the simplest. It's just a standard non-qualified withdrawal in which you will pay taxes on the growth with an additional 10% penalty. They will not touch your principal, so there's no taxes on the contributions you've made, just on the growth, the earnings you've made with an additional 10% penalty. So those would be your sort of four major options if the beneficiary either doesn't go to school or graduates with some extra money in the account.
Yeah, that's really important for people to understand. So it's only the earning portions that is subject to those taxes and penalties. The money you put in was after tax money that's already been taxed. So
one point I did just want to make quickly is how that is ultimately going to be taxed. It is going to be taxed at the rate of whoever ultimately takes that money. So if you're taking out $10,000 for the beneficiary, it's ultimately the beneficiary's tax rate that will be assessed on that money. If it's going to the account owner, then it's assessed at the account owner's level.
yeah, that's good information to know. So I think we touched on a lot of these other topics. One of the other big ones that's a question we get sometimes, and maybe you can kind of speak to this, is the creditor protection of a 529 accounts. How are they protected from creditors if you have something bad financially happen in your life and you've declared bankruptcy? Are your 529 assets secured, and can creditors go after those assets and get into that account?
For the most part, they cannot. So there are some special circumstances depending upon who the owner and beneficiary relationship is, specifically around like spouses. If it's a spousal owned account, that can change things a little bit. But by and large, 529 plans are protected from creditors. So if you are going through a difficult situation, you have a 529 plan for your children's education, creditors cannot touch that money. Those are protected from things like bankruptcy and all of that. So there, by and large, is protection. There are some nuances to that, which in those instances, I would likely recommend someone to get in touch with you or someone else on the advisor team to dive into the specific situation. But again, by and large, you are free from creditors in the 529 wrapper.
Yeah. So when it comes to, these 529 accounts, there's a lot of benefits. We mentioned, so many things that can really help people, throughout a child or a grandchild's life, really kind of save to help for those education expenses. Even for ourselves, we can use a 529 account for ourselves, which I think a lot of people don't understand, but there's a lot of flexibility with the plans. So a lot of upside. John, is there any big downside? Is there any big negative or any big sort of catch to a 529 plan that you would say kind of would go on the other side of the sheet? Because all we've talked about is how great they are and the benefits of these plans. What's the downside, or what's the big concern that people should be maybe aware of, other than just those implications around unused or unqualified withdrawals?
Yeah, I think that is really the major downside is going to be some of the inflexibility. If a child wasn't to go to school, there would be penalties and things like that associated. However, there really are so many pieces of flexibility that have been added where you can make a case to still have it work to your advantage within a 529. So there are some limitations on like international schools. So if you wanted to go to school over in Europe, there could be some issues. That there are a number of international institutions available. There's even some fun ones with these, like there's a culinary school in Italy. So if you wanted to go learn how to make like a cacio e pepe, you can enroll there, and that's 529 eligible. There's also a golf academy in Arizona if you wanted to drop your handicap a couple strokes. So there
Sign
are
me up for
some,
that.
again, like, right? Yeah. So there are some like fun and creative ways that you can utilize them. However, again, there are some hangups as these are directed towards higher education savings, and there are penalties for the most part if you don't use them for that intention. The only other downside that I would really sort of mention in terms of higher education is 529 plans can reduce your FAFSA, your federal financial aid eligibility. It is a lowered reduction, so it's a 5.64% reduction of FAFSA eligibility based on the account value of that 529. So that would be another thing to consider, where if you're really focused on FAFSA, you need that money in order to save up for this. 529s can hinder your eligibility with that. It's a limited downside, but it is a downside nonetheless.
I think we've made a good case for why it's an important consideration, for your financial planning, education plan, certainly, whether it's for yourself, your children, your grandchildren, others. And I think a lot of the benefits probably outweigh those downsides, but it's important to kind of understand how these plans work and how they benefit you. So certainly, John, I want to thank you for taking the time to walk through some of this with us. And for anyone watching, if you've got questions, if you want to know about opening a 529, if you have a 529, you need advice, certainly call our office, give our team a shout, and we're happy to talk through these provisions and others with you for your individual planning needs. So, John, thanks again. Appreciate you being with us. Thanks for your time today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, everyone.